Take a moment and consider the path that you're currently on, and I'm sure it's well traveled. But today's guest may very well disrupt that path because he tends to look at the paths that are less traveled, but traveled by some of the most successful business owners, sales professionals, and innovators. Let's have ourselves a pocket sized pep talk and speak with an author who believes the path that he's suggesting will lead to deeper personal fulfillment and businesses that become disruption proof.
A Pocket Sized Pep Talk, the podcast that can help energize your business and your life with a quick, inspiring message. Now, here's your host, Rob Jolles.
Pat Kilner has created and led 3 companies, 2 in the real estate space and 1 in the training world. He's also the author of a new book, Find Your 6, Stop Lead Generating and Start Building Influence. In short, Pat is a man who wants us to rethink the pivotal relationships that can make or break the way we run our businesses and our lives. Okay, I'm in. Welcome to the show, Pat.
Rob, thanks for having me.
Pat and I were talking right before we hit record here, and I say, stop, because I've really been looking forward to this because Pat and my world intersect. And I may be playing the role of old school Rob today, but we'll see.
I hope so.
Good. But let's start with the book because to me, a lot of times, people come up and ask me about writing books and things like that. And I tell them, you don't typically find a book finds you. So the book, why did you write the book? Why this book?
Yeah, well, I think it's true. It definitely found me. As my bio suggests, I grew up in the real estate space. So I still own a real estate firm and got into real estate after being in a family business. I paid my way through college in my family business, swinging a hammer and painting houses and that sort of thing. And was fortunate enough to find myself in the real estate business and jumped right in and immediately began experimenting with all the ways I could possibly drive revenue into the business, drive sales. How do you do it? What are the best practices? Who should I follow? This is before the age of podcasts. This is early 2000s. And so I started looking for all the people who were the most successful in that ecosystem and ran through the ranks of everything that you can imagine. There was something called sweat hogs back in the day, which was a smile and dial sort of paradigm, scripts, dialogues, objection handlers, learned all of those, did pretty well, some of those, had some fun with that, knocking doors, going door to door, selling my service as a real estate agent, farming areas and that sort of thing. So sort of failed my way forward in the business and tried pretty much everything that was prescribed at the time as the way to drive business. And your speed marketing or networking, if you will, you're going out and you're joining large groups and passing out your business card to as many people as possible. And then 2008 hit. And that was a big disruption for the real estate industry, as well as a lot of other industries. And just to give you a sense of that, for those who don't know, 2008 meant that 1.5 million real estate agents or people in the National Association of Realtors, which is a pretty big sample size of people with a real estate license, turned into 750,000. So cut in half in about a year and a half. So the population was decimated. And that disruption forced me to look at how I could drive business in a way that was much more sustainable, that was disruption proof, and that offered a unique approach to my pipeline, if you will, of clients that others weren't going to have. Because for me, survival was essential. This is what I knew I wanted to do. And I remember family members saying, hey, Pat, if it doesn't work out, I can, I've got some extra money stashed away, or, there was a real doubt that I'd make it through. And I remember thinking to myself, well, I've got to figure out a way to consistently drive business so that I can survive not just this disruption, but any other disruption. And I remember telling my wife, if I can survive this, I'll be able to survive anything. And so that forced me to really start thinking about how I was consistently driving business to my bottom line. And I was fortunate to grow my business while others were failing out of the business. And
Is this, let me just jump in real fast. Are we still in 2008? Are you recovering?
so this is 2008, 2009. I'm starting to grow my business.
Got it. Okay.
And you know, as people who had been in the business for 20, 30 years were taking early retirements, we used to call them, out of the business. I was fortunate enough to really, in many ways, stumble upon the right relationships that allowed me to grow my business. And so that the book came from that. And you know, sometimes we're just fortunate enough to have the right people cross paths with us on a professional level. And I remember having a conversation with one of these super influential people from my business early on it was late 2008, and thinking to myself, gosh, if I could have a conversation like that every day, instead of knocking doors, instead of picking up the phone, it would change everything. Yeah. And so what I became obsessed with was how to find those individuals who were as excited about my business as I was.
Okay, hang tight.
All right, go for it.
You're doing great, but I got a page and a half of notes I've taken already.
Go for it.
So let's just unpack a couple of things, okay?
Yeah.
Because I definitely want to get into, I've done my research on you. I know we're going to get into influencers. We're going to get into some really interesting developments and ideas. But I like walking the path. I love learning how an idea finds a human being. And then we're going to unpack the idea. So I got it. And it makes complete sense. 2008, I learned a few things too in 2008. I was tied to the financial industry as a sales trainer and travel and discretionary funds for travel, et cetera. So it was the same sort of thing. It's a retooling, but I do think that that's what makes us great. I mean, we can be good, but you got to get knocked down a couple times to get great.
Amen.
So I'm listening to you, and I know that that period of time affected you. How about in terms of I was going to say in terms of authors and trainers, but and I know I don't count. Obviously you've read all my books. I mean, let's not get silly. So I don't count. But for me, it was a guy named Tremendous Jones. For me, it was Brian Tracy. These were the Tremendous Jones got me excited. Brian Tracy was more of a process guy. That's why I really began to love Brian Tracy. This was the first person that took that leap from, if you can conceive and believe, you can achieve, which is wonderful. But I need a process for that. Tracy was one of the first guys who began to lay out a repeatable, predictable path of some sort. Were there some authors or some seminars or some books or pieces that you looked at that began to kind of filter into where you're heading?
Yeah, I would say I read everything I could possibly get my hands on. Within the real estate space, a guy named Brian Buffini, who's, other people know him outside of real estate. I liked his approach and talk about something that, you can be brand new in the business and plug into Brian's methodology. But I'd say more than any one author were the people who I was fortunate enough to plug into who had success in their own industries, and having those types of conversations where I was able to say, listen, you've been around the block a few times. You've certainly seen disruption before. How did you weather that?
Okay.
What are the type of relationships you had? And so I started doing research for my book before I realized I had a book to write in many ways.
That's not
by
uncommon,
trying to
by the way.
unpack who these people, what had made them successful. Right. Because, hey, if you're able to have been in the same industry for 30 or 40 years, what a gem of wisdom you're going to have for me. I was just convinced of that, because how many people do we know who start in one industry and then bounce to another and then bounce to another? They're sort of career salespeople because the industry eventually disrupts them out.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I was looking for those people.
Yeah. It's interesting. I remember when I was working with Toyota, and I still work with Toyota off and on, but this was some years ago, where and I'm not necessarily quoting a Toyota, a Toyota number here. I'll just quote a industry number, just in case that number makes somebody uncomfortable. But it was a 900% turnover rate on that showroom floor. Just do the math in your head on something like that. But I see where you're going, and it's really interesting to me because, and I'm going to let you carry this package for us. But I know that it's, that's it. That book, that title is beginning to give us a window to your thinking, which is to find these people, to find these influencers, these influential relationships, as you call them. So keep going, walk me through that door. So you're right. People come to me and I don't want to be the oldest guy in the room anymore, but they come to me and they go, but you're so wise. And I feel like the same kind of, crummy little guy I always was, but you're right. I didn't even know I got wise, but 30, 40 years of doing something, you have to pick up some wisdom.
You've got some wisdom. You've got some wisdom to give, for sure. Yeah. So maybe I'll just, I'll tell a story. I tell it in the book as well about a friend of mine, Jerry. I remember going through this disruption, having this tough conversation with my wife the night before, and realizing I've just got to go find people who have weathered their own storms, because I need to be inspired, but I also need to understand what makes them tick and how they've done this. So I remember picking up the phone and calling a friend named Jerry. He's a tremendous attorney here in the DC metro area, old-time friend of the family. And I called him. I said, Jerry, could I take you out to coffee and just understand how you've done it? And he said, absolutely. Let's sit down. We went. He allowed me to buy him breakfast. It was a 45-minute conversation. He had to go to court that same morning, but he said, I can tell you're a man on a mission. Let's go ahead and meet quickly. So we did, and I probably took 4 pages of notes. Everything from when he worked out to when he got up to how he approached his day, to his client relationships. And I was interviewing him just on looking for clues in what made this guy successful. It wasn't necessarily how he had driven business in. And I remember at the end of that 45 minutes, he turns to me and he says, Pat, you're going to do really well at this real estate thing. I thought, we've only spoken about him and his business the whole time. How does he know anything about, we haven't talked real estate at all. And then he says to me, Pat, I want to connect you to 3 or 4 individuals who I think will be helpful to you. Can I do that when I get back to the office this afternoon? I thought, wow, this is the best breakfast I've ever had. This guy, who is a consummate professional, someone I respect enough to just, spend this time with, he's investing into me. And then he says, the other thing is, Pat, I'm really good at making money in this legal field, but I don't know anything about real estate. If you run across a good investment, would you let me know? And so now he's not only connecting me to great people, he's also interested in actually being in business with me.
Right.
And it all came, in retrospect, I now understand this, it all came because I was asking the right questions. Because I was coming from a place of curiosity. I wasn't trying to pitch him or sell him on anything. And it was completely authentic. And he saw in me someone who was implicitly trustworthy, even though he knows that I haven't been at my craft as long as he has. And that was tremendously eye-opening to me. And I thought, gosh, if I could have people like this connect me to their intimate group of other great professionals and even think that they could do business with me, that would be a win. Right. Could I do this once a week? Could I make that happen once a day? What would that look like? And that was a paradigm shift for me, where I thought, I could knock doors all day long. I could smile and dial and have my headset on for hours a day. But this is a much more fulfilling way to do business. And I think I could build something even bigger this way. And so that was my journey.
Yeah. Wow. What's interesting to me is that we're going to get into some old school, new school techniques, but you just told a story where you, in a sense, perhaps unconsciously, competently, almost like a natural athlete, which is of little use unless somebody stops and tells you what you're doing naturally there.
Right.
But in a sense, you unconsciously, competently demonstrated one of the most basic techniques in not just selling, but in just trust and creating trust and creating a relationship, which is asking questions and listening.
Right.
And I sometimes get embarrassed when I'm not embarrassed, but I've got to move quickly when I'm in front of a room, going over the importance of that, because I can feel the eyes rolling up in people's heads. The problem is nobody does it.
Right.
Very few people really do it. There you were in front of this individual, and listen, there's a couple voices barking in our heads, and the one he most likely has had to deal with is the one that barks, tell him as much as you can because you don't have much time. Right. So, belch all over this individual, but get it out. Right. You didn't. You chose your time to seek information and to listen. And that was, I wasn't there, but that had to really move him in a way. And I wish people would understand that I've spent, my longest programs are 2-day deliveries. So there I am, 2 days, 20 people, a typical workshop. If people, and sometimes people come up and say, the greatest thing I ever learned is that when I ask questions and listen, I'm going to do it for the rest of my career. And part of me is sad and thinks, 2 days, that's all you got. And the other part says, don't forget the open probes, but the other part said, if you really are committed to asking questions and listening and know when to keep those questions open for the rest of your career, you probably did just go through the best sales training program or read the best sales training book or hear today the best training story that you're ever going to hear. Right. To me, it's that important. Right. So I know it's easy for me to come and mop up at the end of your story, but I'm so not surprised by his reaction, just because it's so refreshing for me too. And somebody genuinely wants to listen to me. Right. Normally they'll ask a question and they'll fill in all the answers they're looking for. And I have kind of a little sheepish smiling. Okay, well, this won't last long, but you have any more statements? Questions you want to make? Right. And away we go. All right, let's stay on this. So you like six. Six. You got to find 6 people. Talk to me. First of all, why 6? Right. I'm a competitive guy. I want 7. And
why not? Right. More the merrier.
Didn't know how hard the process was. Remember, it's not a straitjacket, ladies and gentlemen. It's just a process. But okay, roughly 6. How did you arrive at that? Kind of walk me through that.
Sure. So fast forward from that conversation with Jerry, I build a team on these principles. I build my own organization, with me as the practitioner. Then I build a business with other people inside of it. That's a discussion in itself, the difference between practices and businesses, but was able to scale, which is a really interesting thing about building a business this way, is you can actually scale. And that's one of the things I talk about in the book, these relationships. And I, because I scale, I had to start training other people to do what I had done, and had a lot of great feedback for a number of years, probably 4 or 5 years, where I'm training my own people in my own brokerage and then outside of my own brokerage. And I, COVID hit, and I thought, now's the time to write this book. So what I did is I interviewed the top people I could possibly find. I built a pretty darn big network after it had been about 10 years of doing this type of sales and business development. So I got on the phone and some folks I was able to meet in person, for about 60 people who were at the top of their careers, and also at the end of their careers. So these folks had seen a whole life cycle of a career for the most part, people who'd been in their business 30 plus years.
Mhm.
And I was curious to know, because frankly, I initially started to write a book about the mentors that had made all the difference in people's lives. And so I went to talk to these folks and started asking them about the major influencers in their lives from the beginning of their career to the end. And I get to the end of the conversation, and I let them talk as long as we needed to, get to the end of the conversation, and the average was 6 people. It wasn't 100 people. It was 6 really impactful relationships that had really moved the needle for folks over the course of their entire 30 plus year career. And many of them, especially those in sales, and I talked to folks in tech sales or other types of sales, many of them would talk about their major accounts that they had landed. And over the course of an entire career, 6 was oftentimes the average of the relationships that they were able to build. And I thought, wow, that is very contrary to what we oftentimes hear. Maybe it's just what we're hearing, but what I heard when I was a brand new agent, someone getting into sales, was the more the merrier. You know, it's about the numbers. Just get in front of as many people as possible, throw some on the wall and see who sticks. And this was very, very different. What was interesting is most of these people hadn't purposely ended up finding their 6. It was almost an accident, right? They were doing the right things, kind of like my story about Jerry. That was an accidental conversation. Once I realized that I needed to go find Jerry's, then I tried to codify how to go find him again and again and again in the form of other people. And so that's why 6 is because in my sample size of 60 people, that was the average. I don't think anybody had more than 9. And I don't think anybody had less than 5.
Yeah. As you're speaking, first of all, I really mean this. I think what you're saying is really smart, because I'm sitting here kind of reflecting on my career and thinking, I never met you. I've never heard of this before, but how have I lasted 30 years? It's not with a ton of little clients. It was a couple of really pivotal relationships. And the cool part is now I'm going from an unconscious competent to a conscious competent. The cool part is you can't give yourself and truly be that trusted business advisor to 40 different relationships. You can to 5 or 6. You can be there. You can take care of their real estate needs, and you can take care of where the private school is and some of the other things that are a little bit not quite as prominent on the radar. Mm-hmm. But the moment you dilute that pool, you're going to have somebody else doing it. Now you're diluting your own services. So it's interesting. And I'm immediately going back and thinking, I could call them out right now. I'm not gonna, but I could call them out right now. And I did call out one for me, which was Toyota. Right. I know some of these people from Toyota for 35 years. Right. But how many relationships could I really have like that and be genuine and authentic? Right. So you're right. The number, if we do this thing right, the way you're describing it, it's going to limit the number that truly can fit into that category.
Well, I think there's a limit, but there's also sort of think about a table of the people that you most admire. You get more than a 6 top or a 7 top at a restaurant. It's a tough conversation to have. It's hard to make connections between those people. It's hard to invest into those relationships. And so I think on a positive side, when we are really dogged about the talent that we want to hang out with, right? We oftentimes talk about talent that we want to have in our organization. But what if we talk about the talent that we want to have who encircle our organization, who we have success through, also who we are helping them achieve their success? Guaranteed, you're helping Toyota achieve their success if you've been involved with them for 35 plus years. Otherwise, the relationship doesn't flourish. It's a 2-way road, not a 1-way road. This is not a transactional reality.
Right.
So I think for on a human level, this was, for me at least, when I realized, gosh, just think about it. If you could find that one person, you think, gosh, if I had another handful of these folks, my business would be huge.
Yeah.
If they were, because they become the connectors for you.
Right.
And by the way, not everybody is the talent that you're looking for. So going to, one of the biggest things for me in my line of work, real estate agents, the first thing you do is you make a list of all your friends and your family and all the people who you invited to your wedding, and you try to get them to work with you. The thing about them is they already know that you are brand new in this business. So finding my six was also a way for me to go hang out with people who could only view me as a professional. I had to go find a new level of person who I wanted to be in business with. And so for professionals who are maybe in insurance or financial planning and that sort of stuff, it's nice when your family and friends do business with you, but let's not hang, all of our hopes and dreams on them working with us.
Well, no, I remember, I don't know if you know this about me, but I started in the insurance industry, and I had some really good early months. I mean, maybe I'm bragging, but I was number one out of 24 apprentice field underwriters. Now, coincidentally, I have 36 first cousins who live in the state of Maryland. Okay,
not bad.
I had 6 other uncles and 2 aunts. Unfortunately, after a couple months, I seem to have moved into more of a slump area. And then when I got hot, it had very little to do with those kind of one hitters and family and friends, which quite frankly was uncomfortable for me anyway. I wrote an article a couple months ago. I really liked it. Sometimes, as a writer to writer, sometimes we write things and I'm not even that crazy about it. And people seem to really like it. Okay. And then I've got one where I go, they're going to love this one. And it was, people didn't really pay much attention to it, but it was just the struggle of how do you talk to people that and do it the right way? And B, how do you pivot off of that? So you're right. I wouldn't, none of those cousins, they're lovely people, by the way. All Jollises are good people, but none of them would fit in this category that you're describing.
Right. And that's what I had to, you kind of got to let your family off the hook.
Yeah.
In that type industry. And once I did that psychologically, I realized, gosh, they love me, but they're not going to be the pivotal players for me that are going to take my business to a scalable level.
Right.
I cannot rely on my family and friends for revenue for another year or 2 years or 3 years. It's great when they do business with me. I love it. It's fantastic. But I need to go find my 6 to help me grow this enterprise. If I could find 6, and that was just sort of the first step. As an individual, I found 6. Then I transferred those relationships, many of those relationships, onto people who came into my organization. And then you can go and find the next 6 as well at different stages of your career as well. So I think it's an important thing that you don't ever stop looking for that talent.
Right. Yeah. It's interesting. I'm sitting here, I'm sort of fumbling around because I'm really processing what you're saying. And what I love about what you're talking about is you're not really giving us a Rubik's Cube here. It's an idea that is really doable for just about anybody. It's just finding the right person and or the right people. And what's interesting is as somebody who's running a podcast now and changing places on the microphone and asking the questions, almost every significant CEO that I've had on this show, the story is never from a cousin or a family member. It's last person I spoke to selling health insurance, selling to an individual, got to know the individual, very impressive individual. And much like you, just wanted to listen and learn. And the individual was impressed enough that to put his hand out and pulled this guy into a completely different industry, life-changing moment, all because he really kind of got out of his own head there and decided, I'm here to learn. I'm a sponge,
Right.
real fast. But I do this exercise sometimes. I haven't done it in a while. But my office here, I've got in another room, I've got 40 chess clocks, and I'm not a big chess player, but I've got 40 chess clocks because the conversation that you're describing, uh, we sometimes we think we're having them when we sit down, but I bring out the chess clock because if anybody's played chess, chess clock typically has two plungers, two clocks, and what we're not moving chess pieces around. I actually really would like to hear what percentage of time an individual is speaking and what percentage of time the other individual is speaking. Because typically, the more the other person talks, the more they appreciate the person they're talking to.
Hmm.
I'm going to stick with that and think that was one of the building blocks that really started that story that you were talking about. So, but so many people think they're doing that and they're not doing it. That's why I have to literally bring a physical measurement for the conversations I'm having with individuals and then turn it around and say, okay, this is what it just looked like.
Right.
What did it feel like?
Right.
Because I'm on my unconscious my unconscious competency pieces, but there's what we call unconscious incompetency, and
Right.
that's when you don't know that you don't know. And many of us think we're having the kind of conversations you're describing. We're not having them. we just think we are.
That's right.
All right, let's stand now. I was looking at some of your things, and I got a bone to pick with you. I don't know if I got a bone to pick with
I
you,
love it.
but
Here
let's
we go.
talk about and we'll let one move into the other, but uh, kind of the traditional lead generation of the past, and I think you're outlining it right now, but just kind of seal it up in terms of the changes, what the way you see it now, and then let's talk about kind of traditional sales and the way we see that now. But let's start with lead generation. I know that's your hot button.
Yeah. So look, every book has to have a black hat, right? So we all need something to have some fun with here. And so I chose lead generation, but let's define it. Rob, how many travel agents do you know today that you've got them in your
Oh boy.
Rolodex?
Now that's a tough industry.
Right.
If you had asked me before the pandemic, I actually had a fair number because I work with a couple of them and coach them and have trained Brownell Travel. And so I know that industry, but
Has it
I
shrunk
can't
since
speak of it today.
01?
What's that?
Would you say it's shrunk pretty significantly since 2001?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Since 2001, yes, because we were all professional speakers like me. We're using travel agents to book our travel and thought
Right.
maybe someday I'll be able to get my own ticket by myself. But now we laugh and go, did I ever use? No, I'm talking about the longer trips, the more exotic trips, things like that, where you want to use somebody. But it is shrunk to one.
Right.
Barely.
Yeah. And so that's I think it's an important thing to think about, right? So choose an industry, and almost every sales, let's talk service industries right now. Service industries that relied on traditional lead generation sales, travel agents, there was certainly, the certain legal, right, would fit into that.
My profession, we can talk about my profession. When you're a professional speaker, a lot of it has to do with the clients you're working with and the people that they know. So that whole who do you know process, old school,
Right.
which I happen to like, is but a lot of my leads are generated by people either seeing me or people that I know who know other people.
Right. So what I want to propose, and what I do propose at the beginning of the book, is that that financial services, insurance related to that, real estate, all of these industries have seen a disruption as a result of, in some ways, as a result of lead generation. Now, what is lead generation? I got really interested in this. Like, where do we even begin talking about lead generation in the first place? And you've probably used Google Ngram. It's a really cool tool. And you can actually punch in the use of words going back historically, because Google's basically categorized everything that's ever been written. And so you can, if you throw in the word lead generation or the phrase lead generation into Google Ngram, what you'll find is that it basically isn't in use. You actually, it then allows you to go back and see the source documents that it's pulling the word from. We don't actually begin using the word lead generation until the year 1976 when it comes to sales or marketing. We just didn't use it before that. And I thought, well, that's really interesting. So 1976, you see it. And if you look at the instances of the use of the word, it spikes like crazy in the 1980s through the 1990s. And then it starts to fall out of favor around 2010. And then, but if you look at internet lead generation, that continues to explode. So it's really interesting. So I thought, okay, language tells us a lot about where things came from. And so what else was associated with lead generation in the 1980s, 1990s? At least when I was coming up, I heard fake it till you make it. If you actually track that, it tracks almost exactly with lead generation.
Really?
Yeah, it's amazing. If you track things like smile and dial, pound the phones, all of that, 1980s goes crazy. If you then also track the growth of financial industries and real estate, they both grow like crazy in the 1980s. Wolf of Wall Street, Glengarry, Glenn Ross, all these come out of that era, right? What was really, really interesting about this to me is you kind of go back and you go, okay, what changed so that these industries were able to explode in the 1980s? What we started doing is we took really excited, motivated young people out of college, oftentimes athletes. I remember, that headhunter saying, we're looking for athletes who just will run through walls. We'll just give them a script and let them go. And get them on the phone and have them call as long as they possibly could. And we all know those movies and we know people who've done that. Some of us have done that. And you'd call 2 hours, 10 hours, whatever it took to get the number of appointments that you needed. And then there was a distribution between inside sales and outside sales. And you weren't allowed to do outside sales until you had enough sales inside. What we started doing was we gave non-experts just enough to be able to get to an appointment. And what those industries did really, really well was like the industrial revolution of sales. Once we realized that we didn't actually need an expert to sell something, we could just have really motivated people and give them scripts. Then we could just train to the script. When you do that, those people, you actually switch the whole conversation about the individual on the other end of the phone. So the individual on the other end of the phone is just getting close to a sale constantly. Now, we all know that when we feel like we're being closed to a sale by another individual, it's a transaction. This is not a relationship. Now, think about that at scale. You think about all of the money that was made by lead generation, early, 1980s, 1990s to early 2000s. And how many people you also know who have bounced around from one career to another, sales career to another. Because if you don't teach people to be experts, the only thing that they have to go trade with is their ability to be lead generators. As soon as a lead generator can be replaced by AI, so for travel agents, some of the earliest AI, if you will, in air quotes, was Travelocity and sort of its early imitators, right? All of a sudden, if you were a lead generator, you were out of the business. The only people, and you said it, the only people who are still in that industry are people who send you to exotic destinations, who have a niche that is really hard for AI to replicate. And so lead generation ultimately makes us more disruption prone. And that's one of the things that I sort of, one of the discoveries and one of the hypotheses I looked at in my book. The late, great Clayton Christensen of Harvard talks about this concept of innovative disruption. And he's talking about it at an industry level. 1996, look him up. He just passed away last year. Brilliant fellow. And I was really curious. Now, he was predicting the big disruption that was going to happen in the 2000s with innovation. And I was much more interested in what was happening on a personal level because I had to provide for my family, to the people who were doing the lead generation. And it is a form of disruption in the same vein as what Clayton Christensen talks about that happened industry wide. And when that happens, and this is what's most concerning to me, it actually kills people's joy of doing business. Because if you can be replaced by a machine, it is devastating. So I wrote the book, going back to your first question, because I want my kids to have something that they can learn that is disruption proof, because I want them to have a lot of joy in what they do professionally. And that's really, so, coming full circle, but that's how I think about lead generation.
Okay. I'm listening to the tale of, and I don't miss, and I don't think the public misses the smiling and dialing. I don't think they, I was in those rooms, and when you said Glenn Gary, Glenn Ross, you heard an audible, because I don't think people understand how well done that movie was, and how accurate that was, particularly for the era that you're describing. I believe that movie came out in 93 or 92. And so when they're telling a tale of late 80s in a sense,
right.
Listen, I don't think any of us really miss that. If I could, I will tell you that if that didn't damage the sales industry enough, what I refer to as hiring mills did. So the people that you're describing who would say, okay, I'll just smile and dial. I'll do whatever. I need a job. I'm going to leave the industry names out, but there's certain industries out there that knew full well that we're going to bring 10 people in and 8 of them aren't going to make it 3 months, 4 months. We'll have some orphan leads. We'll have some things that we can pick up from the relatives, from that kind of smaller pile.
Right.
And we'll bring in 10 more. And it's a disservice that's done to the sales industry. It's a disservice that's done to the public. I'm hoping that we're sort of moving our way through that. I know as an insurance agent,
hope so. I think so. Yeah.
We saw some athletes where I was. I saw a lot of teachers where I was. And as I study decision cycles, doesn't surprise me because, teaching is an amazing profession. I'm a trainer at heart. So I love teaching. Teaching's wonderful. Well, what's the 1 or 2 things that would frustrate a teacher? Well, every day is kind of the same-ish. And the pay is not really doesn't have any dramatic upticks.
Right.
What does a sales profession sometimes promise or look like? Every day is going to be different, and you'll have the ability to potentially quadruple wherever you think you are, and maybe not, but so I saw sort of that life cycle of a certain candidate that would come in. And that's the old school part I don't miss. I really, I'm glad that for the most part, we seem to be moving past that. But let me pin you down before I let you go. Let me pin you down. You have no fight from me with lead generation. Okay.
All right.
Nothing. I'm stamping your passport. Move on. Nothing to see here. I'm curious about the sales side of it. And you were sort of dipping into it a little bit there, but I believe that you say, or you're right, or there's something I may have seen on your website, but something about kind of, that old school, and, we've got to get rid of some of those practices. Look, there are some, but talk to me about that, because I would like an opportunity to counterpoint this particular piece, or maybe not, but I just want to hear what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah. And I will say this, many of my mentors came out of the time frame that I'm talking about. And I learned a lot from people who, my first broker was a guy who his dad sold door to door, and that's how he learned how to sell. His dad sold vacuum cleaners door to door. and then started a company selling houses door to door. And this is pre-MLS, and they did exceptionally well. And there's a lot of great skills to being able to present yourself and your ideas well to a perfect stranger. There's a lot of great skills that can come out of that. But
There it is.
if we don't realize that as an employer now, if I don't realize that my job is actually to create people who are superb at their craft, I'm setting them up for failure. And so it's a double-edged sort of sword here. You need to not only teach people how to make business happen, make business come in the door, you also have to equip them with excellence at what they do. And I think that's what we started to lose when we were milling people through constantly. So, that's one thing I think none of us miss. I think also when we start to call people leads instead of Rob, family, client, we begin to commoditize the person on the other side of this deal who has immense potential to change our businesses. I know that I've had people who I thought, I'm sitting there in the living room, thought, gosh, this is gonna be a really tough person to work with. By the end of the deal, they're sending me all their friends and their family because of the human investment that I had to pour into them. And I've sat in front of other people and we think this would be amazing if this worked out, and there's a disconnect. So I think that, but unless I had the ability to be excellent at what I did professionally, they were always going to feel like a commodity. I'll give you another instance, Rob. I've had the honor of having a few people actually come to me and say, listen, I'm getting out of the business. I'd like you to assume my book of business. And if you've been in the business long enough, this has probably happened to you, depending on what you do. And one seemed like a much smaller book of business. But amazingly, this lady had such deep relationships that provided so well for my family for a number of years, that book of business. The other had a Rolodex that was 10 times as large. To date, and I've had that book of business for 5 years, I've done 2 deals from that entire book of business. Why? Because of the methodology of client acquisition. And when you start the client acquisition off from a commoditized standpoint, where it's just transactional, that business is not transferable. And so that's what I want to encourage people is, if you want to have a business, we talk a lot about building businesses. If you want to have a business that if you get hit by a bus, it's transferable and your family can still live on it, this is a different way to go about that. When all you've done is generate leads, you can't transfer those.
Well, it speaks directly to the point that you're pounding home, which is find your 6. What you just described was a book of business from a woman who sounds like might not have been 6, but her relationships were deep. And you had another one with a Rolodex, which is, kind of the complete opposite. I'm sitting here. I don't want to tell, I'm going to tell you off the air this title of a book that I've always had, but it relates to something that you just said. Sorry, folks, I'm not letting that one out yet. But it relates to what you just said. You just kind of, once again, just followed that same pattern. But, I just want to remind you, I'm not hearing it yet. So I want to remind you, and I want to remind everyone that obviously tactics and techniques have changed. Just the sheer fact that most people have no idea that there is a decision cycle with 6 stages and 3 decision points. And why would that be of no interest to anyone? If I can track the way the other individual across from me is thinking and just simply where they are in that process to allow me to intelligently line up, wouldn't that be of value? Okay, maybe that's not, a 70s tactic, but when I wrote my first sales book, I was talking, once again, what are we talking about? Asking questions and listening. And I was talking and this guy said, I have this book. It was a 2-day program. It was in Minnesota. I'll bring it in. It was from, I think it was like Northwest Life or something. It was an old insurance company from 1917. It was their manual. And, a guy with a fedora whistling with a briefcase, walking across the street, pencil drawing, beautiful. First page, ask questions and listen. So there is this, what I just want to make sure I protect without being, without old schooling anybody is, I promise you there's new ideas. There's, thank goodness there's new ideas, but because it's old doesn't make it wrong yet. We have to,
100%.
Let's unpack it, figure out what it is. And then, like, I'll give you an old one. Okay. Pre-commits, which another day I can make a minor argument for, but a pre-commit, which most people will hear of, Pat, if I'm able to show you a way to not only increase your real estate sales, but improve your relationships, would you, do business with me? It kind of feels like, what's it going to take to get you in this car today? Right. It's, that's one to me that just screams orange leisure suit, just kind of old. Right. Now, on another day, I'll explain to you where it could potentially fit and why it's there and why I would use it about 5% of the time. Mm-hmm. So but it's an example of something that probably has seen its better days. And we have people using that in a script that they don't understand, how to manage, and applying that type of trial close to close friends and family. Right. You don't really want to use that. So I know that there's an island for both these thoughts that we're talking about. But I am, until I finish up here, I'm going to hopefully always kind of try and manage the old and the new together. And
there's going to be great things. And I know just in the way that I talk to clients and my own people, my organization, there's things that you can pick up and ultimately these things become your own and they become deeply nuanced. And part of the power of realizing when we started talking about people as leads in lead generation is to realize, gosh, there was a way that people sold a lot of things prior to 1974 as well.
Yeah.
And so what did that look like, right? So there's a manual from 1920. People have been selling things since we stopped, I don't know, since we started farms and, started specialization of the goods that we had and we would trade and barter. So we've been selling for a very, very long time. It's only recently that we started actually commoditizing the individual to the extent that we have. And my biggest point is not, look, if you want to do that, knock your socks off. The problem is it is making you more disruption prone because a computer can use that same concept that you just talked about, that getting to yes concept, getting you to nod. Okay. The next, let's make the sale type of thing. And they do it really, really well. They actually, I would say just based on the number of Amazon products on my front porch any given week, I'm being sold by Amazon pretty darn well. And they're showing me what I want to buy before I even know I want to buy it. So if you're in that game, your job is at stake. If you're in the game, however, of creating deep, meaningful relationships, that is something that can't be disrupted. That can't ever be taken away from you. Okay. And so in some ways I'm saying something very old.
Right. Good. All right. Well, see that wasn't so bad. No. I was looking forward to more of a fist fight here, and I'm a big tough guy on Zoom. Usually you would knock you to, but no, seriously, I think that we're seeing it. There are certain pieces that we've got to keep evolving. We've got to keep generating new ideas. And I never want to be the guy who clings to something because that's the way it was done for me. I just look at my office. I think everyone who's listening, look around you right now. Look at what's changed, not just in the last year and a half, but the last 5 years, 10 years. It's amazing. Okay. Absolutely. All right. Last question. And 60 seconds or less. You've got me buying in completely to finding my six. Okay. So some characteristics what kind of characteristics should we be looking um, for those potential influencers, for those potential, big sixes? Well, I'm calling them big six. I don't know what you call them. What do you call them? The big six?
I call them your six influencers. Really.
Six influencers. Okay.
So,
all right.
Okay. So 60 seconds or less. First thing is a mindset. You are in a talent search mode. So just like you're hiring for somebody, you have to have enough conversations. If you only interview one person, by the way, you're going to think they have all the characteristics. This is classic mistake of people hiring early in their career. So you have to have a lot of conversations to know who you're looking for, but you're going to get good at it pretty fast. Characteristic number one is I began looking for people who were implicitly trusted at what they do. So these are people who in my world have a fiduciary responsibility, right? They have to put the client's needs above their own, which immediately makes them non-commodity sort of sellers, right? They're people who deal at a very high level of fiduciary trust. That's the first thing. The second thing is a total ownership mindset. So these are people who are not sort of mercenaries for the organization that they work for. They are going down with the ship. Who they are is part and parcel of the company. Oftentimes these are business owners. I found a lot of business owners who have the weight of responsibility for other people and the responsibility of the mission of the organization. They became tremendous referral sources for me. So I'd say those two characteristics, if I was going to classify any two as the most important, I'd say those two. Really high level of implicit trust that they habitually use, and an ownership mindset. They're the ones who are going down with the ship if the ship is going down, and the ones who are making the ship fly during the good times.
Yep. Mind if I just tag one on, and you're the author?
Please.
You can go, Rob. I don't like that one. Untag. But I remember when I was studying negotiators, and it was really hard to find good negotiators because a lot of them don't like to be studied. Believe it or not, it's harder than you think to find good negotiators. But I remember I was looking at this one study, and it was they had successful results, and both parties viewed whatever they had negotiated as acceptable and successful. So you weren't getting at anybody. But I loved the third criteria, which was long-term results, not short-term. And I'm only throwing that out because if I went into the Wayback Machine and looked at a few, didn't know what you were calling them, but people that I felt were influencers, the ones that I misread were knocking it out of the park, but they weren't knocking it out of the park long term. In other words, they were more flashy, and sometimes that can catch your eye a little bit. It caught my eye as a young salesman. And I remember looking at that study and realizing I'm adding that to my criteria. I'm thrilled that you're successful, but long-term success, I need to see it longer term before I hitch my wagon, to your thoughts and ideas.
Amen. Actually, one of the other criteria that I talk about in the book is longevity.
Okay.
And to that point is these are people who have these characteristics over the long haul because how else are you going to prove out your real dedication to the client unless it's over a longer period of time? So longevity is definitely one of those criteria as well. But those are, for what it's worth, that's if you have those criteria, what you'll realize at first, and this can be sort of disheartening at first, is when you apply those criteria to the people in your life currently, you'll realize that you don't have as many people who meet those criteria as you thought. In fact, it's like a pyramid, right? You have most people actually don't trade in high level trust as habitually and haven't been doing it for a very long time. And, they punch the clock, but they're not going to go down with the ship if it goes down. So you sort of have these different levels. It's only at the top that you find those criteria. And that's why they're so influential. Right. Is because when they give a recommendation to work with you, it's lights out. You're not negotiating anymore. Right. So you basically don't have to do a sale because their trust is transferred to you.
Right. Excellent. Okay. The book came out in May.
Came out just October. Early
Okay.
October. Yeah.
Oh boy. So it's how's
fresh.
it doing? How's it doing so far?
It's well. Amazon said we're number one new release in a couple of our categories, which is great.
Outstanding.
Yeah, really excited about that.
Good. Well, that doesn't mean that folks listening, not only should you rush out and buy the book. Gee, I forgot the title. Tell me what it is again.
Find Your Six. Stop lead generating. Start building influence.
Okay. And the author's name is Kilner. And I really, when I get a book that I like, I tag on. Not only are we all going to buy that book, including me, because I want to give you a verified review.
Thank you.
But that's the second part, folks. When you get that book and you start reading it, and you realize that we've got a simple idea that you can implement. I'm a simple guy. I didn't get lost in this conversation. It's not as finding that top of the pyramid. That's the toughest part you gave us right at the end there. But really trimming it down to those key influencers is critical. Get that book, read that book, implement what you're learning, and for goodness sakes, 2-3 sentences, but give that book a review. It means a lot on Amazon. It changes the algorithm, and my goodness, it's the kindest thing you can do for an author. So please don't forget, do write a review when you like a book, Pat's book, Larry's book. When you read a book and you like it, you write that review. You're reaching out, you're shaking hands with the author, and I can tell you right now, we authors appreciate it. So please, 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 reviews are good. Okay.
Absolutely. Rob, by the way,
yeah.
If they want to kick the tires on the book, I have a free chapter. Chapter 1 is for free on my website. They can go check it out. Findyoursix.com. You can get a free chapter. In fact, I'll share with you a link so that folks in the show notes can
good.
Go right
and I'll
to that
put
link.
it on the, yeah, exactly. I'll put it on the show notes. And that was my next question. How do people get a hold of you?
Yeah. Findyoursix.com or
Okay.
patrickkilner.com lead you to the same place.
Good.
That's the best way to get a hold of me.
Okay. And if you're listening and you're driving in your car and you're going, what, how, who, don't worry. Just when you get to your computer, just go up. I'll have it I'll have it in the show notes so that you can contact him. Pat, great job. You might've set the record here of my longest interview, and I'm coming up on my 100th anniversary pretty soon. So, but I would have gotten rid of you if I wasn't finding it interesting. I do it nicely, but I go, where's the day gone? I'm sitting there going, I could go 10 more questions on this. Really enjoyed it. Love the conversation. I'm looking forward to getting a book. Remember, you're not allowed to send me one. I did notice that I believe it's on Audible too, right?
It is on Audible.
Did you read it?
I did indeed read it.
Yeah,
It was a lot of fun.
I read mine, and I actually really like. It's not an easy couple of days, but I really like the process of reading my own book. I don't need somebody else. Unless Stanley Tucci's available, I don't want anyone else reading my book. So, but congratulations.
I'm going to have you read my next one, Rob.
Okay. You know what? I'll tell you what, just like training, a team read might be pretty cool. I wonder if anybody's ever tried that before. So, we're innovating. Okay, folks, you met a good Pat. Thank you so much for being on the show. Really grateful.
Thank you, Rob. It's been an absolute pleasure.
You bet. Well, we'll do it again, best that we can next time. And until then, stay safe.
Thanks so much for listening. If you enjoyed today's show, please rate and recommend it on iTunes, Outcast, or wherever you get your podcasts. You can also get more information on this show and Rob at jollis.com.